On a grey winter morning, a girl in a black coat stood alone at the edge of her mother's grave. She was 12 years old, but the weight in her eyes belonged to someone much older. Tucked deep inside her pocket was something no one else in the cemetery knew existed. A tiny USB her mother had hidden for her before she died. Her mother had been more than a parent. She was a scientist, the kind who uncovered secrets powerful men wanted buried. And they silenced her for it. Now, all those secrets, and the danger they carried, rested in the trembling hands of a child. Elena did not know who she could trust. Around her, strangers whispered. Across the street, a black car idled, its windows dark as obsidian. And at her side, almost unseen in the fog, a German shepherd watched, his amber eyes unblinking, as if he understood more than any human. It was the beginning of a story no one would believe, the story of a girl, a detective uncle, and a loyal canine named Shadow who would uncover a truth strong enough to save or destroy the world. The sky hung low over the cemetery, heavy with grey clouds that seemed to press down on the earth. A cold wind swept through the rows of headstones, carrying the dry rustle of withered leaves and the faint scent of rain. It was the kind of day that muted color and sound, where even voices seemed reluctant to break the silence. Elena stood alone near the fresh mound of dirt, her black dress hanging awkwardly on her slender frame. At 12 years old, she was still too young to understand the permanence of death, yet too old not to feel the full weight of it. Her small hand clutched something in the pocket of her coat, a silver USB drive no bigger than her thumb. She pressed her fingers around it as though it were a lifeline, something that tethered her to her mother, Amelia Cross, who now lay beneath the soil. Around her, the funeral unfolded in fragments. Men and women dressed in dark suits murmured condolences, their words polite but hollow. Some were colleagues from the research institute where Amelia had worked, people with sharp eyes, who carried folders under their arms even at a funeral. Their whispers floated through the air like smoke. Elena couldn't catch every word, but she heard enough to know they weren't just mourning. They were speculating. Such a sudden heart failure. So young, one said quietly. Amelia had enemies. You know she was working on something big, another replied. Big or dangerous? The word slid into Elena's ears and stayed there, heavy and unwelcome. She lowered her gaze, unwilling to meet their eyes. To them, she was just the child of the deceased, a footnote in a larger story, invisible except for pity. Her gaze drifted to the coffin. A thin layer of dirt already dusted the polished wood, like time itself was eager to erase her mother's presence. Amelia's absence was a hollow space Elena could feel pressing against her chest. She wanted to cry, to scream, to demand the world stop moving. But instead, she stood still, silent, fingers tightening around the USB until her knuckles ached. Someone placed a hand on her shoulder. A neighbor, she thought, or maybe one of Amelia's colleagues. She was brilliant, Elena, the woman said softly. The world lost a great mind today. Elena nodded without looking up. Brilliant. Great mind. Words spoken like badges of honor. But none of them captured the warmth of her mother's hand when she braided Elena's hair in the morning, or the sound of her humming in the kitchen, or the way her eyes softened whenever she said goodnight. The world might remember Amelia as a scientist. Elena remembered her as a mother. And now she had neither. The priest's voice carried faintly over the cemetery, reciting words about dust returning to dust, about eternal rest. But Elena hardly heard them. She was watching the people scattered among the gravestones, noticing how some looked at her with sympathy, others with suspicion. Two men in particular stood apart, dressed in dark coats, speaking to no one. Their eyes kept drifting toward her, sharp and calculating. When she looked back at them, they shifted their gazes away, but unease bloomed in her stomach. It was then she noticed the dog. On the far edge of the cemetery, near the wrought iron fence, stood a German shepherd. Tall, strong, his coat a blend of sable and black. He wasn't part of the funeral party. No one seemed to acknowledge him. Yet he stood completely still, ears pricked, eyes fixed on her. There was nothing threatening in his gaze. Instead, it was steady, watchful, as if he understood something no one else could. Elena felt a strange comfort in that stare, a reminder that not all eyes on her were cold or pitying. She held his gaze for a long moment, her breath catching, before a passing mourner stepped between them. When the figure moved, the dog was gone. The service ended. People began to drift away, their coats flapping in the wind, their footsteps crunching over gravel paths. Elena remained where she was, unwilling to leave. The USB in her pocket felt heavier now, like a secret whispering against her skin. She hadn't told anyone about it, not even the relatives who offered to take her in. She didn't fully understand why she kept it hidden, only that her mother had pressed it into her coat with urgency in those final hours, and Amelia never did anything without reason. "Come, child." Her aunt's voice cut through the fog. "It's time to go home." Elena nodded, though her feet hesitated. She cast one last glance at the grave, at the mound of fresh earth that seemed both too shallow and too deep. Then she turned away, her hand still wrapped tightly around the secret her mother had left behind. As she walked toward the car, a chill rippled down her spine. She glanced across the street and saw it. A black sedan parked under the shadow of a bare tree. Its engine idled softly, breath steaming from the exhaust. Through the tinted windows she could see nothing, but she felt the weight of unseen eyes following her. Her aunt didn't notice, the other mourners didn't notice, but Elena did. And in her pocket, the USB seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the distance, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a dog's bark carried on the wind, low, resonant, protective. Eleanor turned her head sharply, but the cemetery was empty now. Only the whisper of the wind remained. She pressed her hand harder against her pocket, the world suddenly colder, darker. She didn't know why, but she understood that whatever her mother had left her, it wasn't just a keepsake. It was a responsibility, and someone out there wanted it back. The house was quieter than usual that night, though every corner seemed to echo with the absence of Amelia Cross. Eleanor sat on the edge of her bed, still in the same black dress from the funeral, her small legs dangling just above the floor. The lamps cast a dim amber glow across the room, making the shadows stretch long and thin, like watchful figures waiting in silence. Her aunt had insisted she eat, but Elena had only moved food around her plate. Her throat was too tight, her stomach too heavy. Now, upstairs, she felt the ache of exhaustion, mixed with the restless thrum of fear. The image of the black sedan outside the graveyard kept returning to her mind, like a splinter she couldn't shake. She tugged at the lapel of her coat, which she had tossed onto the chair by the desk. Something shifted inside the lining, a small, uneven weight she hadn't noticed before. Frowning, Eleanor pulled the coat onto her lap and slid her hand into the inner pocket. Her fingers closed around something cold and metallic. She drew it out slowly, and her breath caught. It was the same USB drive she had felt at the funeral, But now she saw it clearly for the first time under the lamplight. Silver, narrow, its surface scratched as though it had been handled roughly. It didn't look like much, yet the instant she held it in her palm, a shiver ran up her arm. For a moment, she simply stared, the quiet of the room closing around her. Then she noticed a folded piece of paper tucked deeper in the lining, so thin it had nearly been missed. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was her mother's, precise but hurried, each letter pressed firmly into the paper as though Amelia had been racing against time. "Eleanor," the note began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone. Trust only your uncle, Gabriel Ward. Protect this with your life. The world is not what it seems. Be brave, my darling. Mom." The words blurred as Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She pressed the paper against her chest, curling over it like she might shield it from the world. The grief she had kept inside at the funeral now cracked open, pouring out in silent sobs. Her small body shook, her face buried in the fabric of her coat, the note clutched tight. After a long while, she forced herself to look at the USB again. It was just a sliver of metal, but it suddenly carried the weight of her mother's voice, her urgency, her warning. What could possibly be inside that required such secrecy and such fear? She set her laptop on the desk and slid the drive into the port. At the screen flickered and rows of folders appeared, all locked with layers of encryption. Strange codes scrolled across the screen like doors that refused to open. Elena clicked again and again, frustration building, until the machine emitted a sharp error tone. She sank back into the chair, defeated. She wasn't a scientist. She wasn't even a teenager yet. How could she possibly understand whatever was locked away here? But her mother had trusted her, not someone from the institute, not the colleagues whispering at the grave, her. That thought steadied her. She lifted the note again, whispering the words out loud. "Trust only your uncle. Protect this with your life." Her voice cracked, but she repeated it as though saying it might anchor her. A gust of wind rattled the window pane. Elena startled, glancing toward the curtains that swayed faintly. For a moment, she thought she heard a sound outside. A low growl carried on the wind, deep and resonant, like the bark she'd heard faintly at the cemetery. She hurried to the window and peeked through the curtain, but the street was empty, washed in the pale light of a street lamp. Only the silence of the neighborhood stretched back at her. Her heart thudded in her chest. She let the curtain fall back into place and returned to her bed. Crawling under the blanket, she clutched both the USB and the folded note tightly in her hands. The objects were small, but they were all she had left of Amelia, and the only clue to a truth bigger than she could yet understand. The tears came again, slower this time, but deeper, burning her throat. She thought of Amelia's last smile, the way her hand had smoothed Elena's hair just days ago, as though everything were normal. And now, she was gone, leaving behind only warnings and secrets. Elena curled on her side, the USB pressed into her palm, the paper under her cheek. Exhaustion pulled her down, but even as she drifted into uneasy sleep, she whispered to herself, "I'll keep it safe, Mom. I promise." In the hallway outside her room, the floor creaked. Her aunt, perhaps, moving to check on her. Or perhaps just the old bones of the house settling. Elena was too tired to care. But outside, parked quietly beneath the same street lamp she had just peered through, the black sedan sat once again. Its headlights were off, its engine cold. But inside, a shadowed figure waited, patient and unblinking. The man lifted a phone to his ear and spoke a single sentence into the darkness. "She has it." The night pressed close around the little house, a silence so heavy it seemed unnatural. In her room, Elena stirred awake, her cheeks damp from tears shed in sleep. The lamp on her desk still burned faintly, casting a dull glow over the papers and books, but it was the silence that pulled her from dreams, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, but full. She sat up slowly, clutching the USB that had never left her hand. The folded note lay beneath her pillow, as if she feared it might vanish if she let it go. For a long moment, she simply listened. The hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the ticking of the wall clock in the hall. Normal sounds, safe sounds. And then she felt it, the prickling on the back of her neck, the weight of eyes she could not see. Heart quickening, Elena slid out of bed and padded barefoot to the window. She pulled the curtain back just an inch, careful not to disturb it enough to draw notice. There it was. Across the street, parked beneath the skeletal branches of a leafless tree, sat a black car. Its engine was off, its headlights dark, but she could see the faint reflection of the street lamp glinting on its polished surface. The car hadn't been there when she fell asleep. She was certain of it. Now it sat like a shadow given form, patient and menacing. She pressed her forehead against the glass, squinting, trying to see through the windshield. Nothing. The windows were tinted so dark they reflected only the pale glow of the lamp. Yet she felt it. Someone was inside, watching. Her breath fogged the glass. She pulled back quickly, afraid the movement had been noticed. With trembling hands, she let the curtain fall back into place, retreating a step, as though the thin fabric could shield her from whatever lay outside. "Elena." Her aunt's voice floated faintly from down the hall, drowsy, unaware. Elena froze, then whispered back, "I'm fine." Her voice was so small it barely carried beyond her lips. She didn't want her aunt to worry. More importantly, she didn't want her aunt to know, not yet. She sat back on the edge of her bed, clutching the USB to her chest, her mind racing. Maybe it was just a neighbor's car. Maybe she was imagining the feeling of eyes, but deep down, something told her otherwise. She thought of her mother's note, of the urgency pressed into every letter. Trust only your uncle. Protect this with your life. The car remained. Minutes passed, then an hour, and still it did not move. The longer it stayed, the more real the danger became. At one point, she returned to the window, cautious, lifting the curtain just enough to peek again. This time she saw it, the faint glow of a cigarette ember inside the vehicle, flaring and fading. Someone was there, watching, waiting. Fear clamped down on her chest, but alongside it came something else, a quiet defiance. If they wanted the USB, they would not have it. Her mother had trusted her, and she would not fail. The night stretched on. Sometime after midnight, the car's headlights suddenly flicked on, washing the street in a pale beam. Elena ducked instinctively, pressing herself against the wall. When she dared to look again, the car was rolling forward, its tires crunching softly over the pavement. It crept slowly down the street, as if to remind her it had been there, as if to promise it would return. Then it was gone, swallowed by the dark. But the dread it left behind did not vanish. Elena sat awake long after, staring at the USB in her hand, her mother's words echoing in her mind. The house around her seemed fragile, too thin to keep danger out. Shadows shifted in the corners, every creak of the floorboards making her flinch. At last, exhaustion claimed her again, and she curled under her blanket, the USB pressed tight in her palm. Before her eyes closed, she thought she heard something faint outside. A sound carried on the night air. Not the low rumble of the car this time, but something different. A bark. Deep, steady, resonant. It faded almost as soon as it came. leaving her wondering if it had been real at all. When dawn finally came, the car was gone. The street once again ordinary. Neighbors walked their dogs, sprinklers clicked in nearby yards, and the world looked as though nothing had changed. But Elena knew better. The first shadows had arrived, and they would not leave her alone. The next morning broke pale and hesitant, the light filtering through low clouds, as though the sun itself was reluctant to rise. The house smelled faintly of cold coffee, and the lavender perfume that still lingered in Amelia's coats hung neatly in the hallway closet. Elena sat curled in the living room armchair, her knees pulled to her chest, the USB drive hidden in her pocket like a secret heartbeat. She had not slept much, and what little rest she found was restless, haunted by images of the black car outside and the ember of a cigarette glowing in the dark. When the knock came, sharp against the wooden door, she jolted upright, her breath caught in her throat. Her aunt called from the kitchen, "I'll get it," but Eleanor was already moving, bare feet whispering across the carpet. Something inside her stirred, a mixture of fear and anticipation, as though she had been waiting for this sound all along. She opened the door. Standing on the porch was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his hair peppered with grey, his face lined with the kind of weariness that only years of carrying other people's tragedies could carve. His dark coat clung to him, rain speckled across the fabric, and beside him, sitting with regal stillness, was a German shepherd whose sharp eyes fixed instantly on Eleanor. "Uncle Gabriel," she whispered. Gabriel Ward gave a slow nod, his gaze softening when it landed on her. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low, steady, a voice made for calming frightened witnesses and coaxing the truth from silence. He stepped forward, but it wasn't Gabriel who reached her first. It was the dog. The shepherd rose smoothly, trotting the short distance between them. His movements were strong, yet unhurried, deliberate. Elena stiffened at first, instinct telling her to back away, but the dog stopped just in front of her and lowered his head. His dark eyes looked up into hers, steady, searching, as though he was waiting for permission. Slowly, tentatively, she extended her small hand. He pressed his nose into her palm, warm breath ghosting across her skin, and something inside her loosened. For the first time since the funeral, Eleanor felt she wasn't completely alone. "This is Shadow," Gabriel said. His voice carried a note of pride and perhaps something deeper. Gratitude. Respect. "He's my partner," Eleanor nodded, her hand now buried in the thick fur at Shadow's neck. The dog leaned against her leg, not moving away, not demanding attention, just settling there like he had been hers all along. Gabriel stepped inside, his boots heavy on the floorboards. Her aunt appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a towel. Relief washed across her face when she saw him. "Gabriel, thank God you're here." He clasped her shoulder briefly, his eyes scanning the room the way trained men do. Every corner, every window, every exit noted in seconds. His presence shifted the air. It felt safer, but also more serious, as though he had brought the storm with him. Eleanor sank back onto the armchair, Shadow immediately lying at her feet, his body stretched protectively along the floor. His ears twitched with every sound, his gaze never straying far from her. She felt his weight near her ankles, solid and grounding. Gabriel took the seat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I came as soon as I could," he said softly. His eyes, the same storm grey as Amelia's, studied her carefully. "She told me once, if anything ever happened, I was to come to you first." Elena's throat tightened. She touched the pocket of her sweater where the USB rested but said nothing. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, to tell him about the car, about the feeling of being watched, but the words caught. Instead, she pressed her hand against Shadow's fur, and the dog responded by resting his chin on her knee, a quiet reassurance. Gabriel noticed the exchange, the way the dog had claimed her without hesitation. A faint smile flickered across his tired face. "Looks like he's already picked you," he said. "He doesn't do that with everyone." The moment lingered, fragile and full of unspoken weight. Outside, a branch scraped against the window, and Elena flinched. Shadow's ears perked, his muscles tensing, but he didn't move, only watched, only waited. Gabriel's eyes followed hers to the window, and he nodded as though confirming something he already suspected. "It's all right," he said, though his hand rested near the pocket of his coat, where the outline of his badge and the faint bulge of a holstered weapon could be seen. Elena finally whispered, "It doesn't feel all right." Her uncle didn't argue. He leaned back, his gaze steady on her, and said instead, "That's why I'm here." For a while, the room filled only with the hum of the refrigerator and the soft rhythm of Shadow's breathing at her side. The dog had not moved once, his chin still heavy on her knee, as though anchoring her in place. Elena thought of her mother's note, of the words etched into her memory. "Trust only your uncle. Protect this with your life." She looked at Gabriel again, and for the first time since Amelia's death, she allowed herself to believe those words might be enough. She didn't say it out loud, but her fingers curled around the USB in her pocket. Soon, she would have to show him. For now, it was enough that Shadow stayed close, and that her uncle's steady eyes promised he would not let her face the shadows alone. The living room had grown quieter as the afternoon wore on, the air thick with the kind of silence that comes after grief has settled, but before answers have begun. Gabriel sat in the armchair across from Elena, his hands clasped loosely, though his posture carried the weight of a man ready for whatever danger might press against the door. His coat was draped over the chair, and the badge clipped to its pocket gleamed faintly in the shifting light. Elena had not moved much since his arrival. She sat with her legs tucked beneath her, Shadow stretched protectively at her feet. Her fingers never strayed far from her pocket, where the USB rested like a secret burning against her skin. She had repeated her mother's words in her head again and again. "Trust only your uncle. Protect this with your life." Now, under Gabriel's steady gaze, the moment of choice pressed in on her. She took a shaky breath, her small hands curling tighter. "Uncle," she whispered, her voice fragile but deliberate. "I have something. Something Mom left me." Gabriel leaned forward, his brows furrowing. "What do you mean?" His tone was calm, but beneath it lay a sharp edge of alertness, as if he already sensed the gravity of what she was about to say. Slowly, Eleanor drew the USB from her pocket. It gleamed in the dim light, ordinary to the unknowing eye, but heavy with everything Amelia had died to protect. Her hands trembled as she placed it on the coffee table between them. Gabriel's eyes locked on it, his body going still. "Where did you get that?" "She put it in my coat before." Eleanor's throat tightened, the word before stretching into silence she couldn't fill. She looked down, her shoulders curling inward, and Shadow pressed his head against her knee, as if to remind her she wasn't alone. Gabriel picked up the USB carefully, like one might handle a piece of evidence from a crime scene. He turned it in his fingers, studying every scratch on its surface. His jaw tightened, and for a moment he didn't speak. When he did, his voice was low, weighted with recognition. "Eleanor, do you understand what this could be?" She shook her head. "Only that she told me to give it to you, to no one else." She hesitated, then added, "She said to protect it with my life." Gabriel exhaled, a long and heavy breath that carried both grief and fear. He set the USB back down on the table, his hand lingering near it. "Your mother was working on something dangerous. I didn't know how deep it went. But if she trusted you with this, it means she knew people would come looking for it." At that, Shadow stirred. The dog lifted his head from Elena's knee and leaned forward, his nose pressing close to the USB. He sniffed once, twice, then drew back with a low, throaty growl. The sound rumbled through the room, subtle but unmistakable. His ears pricked, his eyes locked on the small device, as though it were alive with threat. Elena's eyes widened. She reached down, stroking the fur along Shadow's neck in an attempt to calm him, but the dog didn't move away. He stayed tense, every muscle taut, as if warning them both. Gabriel noticed too. His gaze flicked between the USB and the dog. "He's picking up on something," he muttered. It wasn't superstition. It was the voice of a detective who had learned long ago to respect the instincts of a canine partner. Whatever this is, it's not just information. It's dangerous. Fear flickered across Elena's face. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly chilled. "They already know I have it," she whispered. "At the cemetery. There were men. And last night a car. It stayed for hours." Her voice cracked. "They're watching." Gabriel's head snapped toward her, his gray eyes sharpening. "You're sure?" Elena nodded quickly, tears threatening at the edges of her lashes. "I saw someone smoking inside. They didn't leave until almost morning." For a long moment, Gabriel sat in silence, his hand pressed against his mouth, his eyes distant. The weight of what she said pressed on him like stone. Finally, he leaned forward, his tone deliberate, steady, anchoring. "Elena, you did the right thing. You kept it safe. And you told me. That's what your mother wanted." His gaze softened. "You're not alone in this anymore." The words struck her like a lifeline thrown into storm water. She blinked hard, clutching at them, though the fear still lingered. Shadow shifted then, climbing to his feet and circling the coffee table. He positioned himself directly between Elena and the door, his stance protective, head slightly lowered, as though ready for something neither of them could see yet. Gabriel placed a reassuring hand on the dog's back, then looked at Elena again. "From now on, he doesn't leave your side. If he growls, you listen. If he pulls you away, you follow. He'll know before we do when something's wrong." Elena nodded slowly, her hand reaching to rest gently on Shadow's flank. The dog leaned into her touch, his growl fading into a deep exhale. She felt the vibration of his strength beneath her palm, steady and alive. The USB still sat on the table between them, small and silent, but it seemed to fill the room with its presence. To Elena, it felt like the beginning of a path she hadn't chosen, but could no longer turn away from. To Gabriel, it was a reminder of Amelia's brilliance, and the storm her work had unleashed. But to Shadow, it was something else entirely. A threat already alive, waiting to break through the walls. His eyes never left it, and in the dim light, his body formed an unspoken promise that whatever darkness lay ahead, he would meet it first. The house settled into an uneasy quiet after nightfall, though it was not the kind of quiet that brought rest. Shadows stretched long across the living room walls, bending with the flicker of the old lamp. Elena sat on the couch, knees tucked under a blanket, the USB now hidden in the drawer of a side table at Gabriel's insistence. Shadow lay at her feet, his ears pricked, his breathing slow, but never truly relaxed. He seemed to hover in a state between rest and readiness, as if some part of him refused to sleep. Gabriel paced the room, phone pressed to his ear. He had been trying to reach an old contact, but the call wouldn't connect, static, swallowing the signal. He lowered the phone, staring at it with the kind of frown that wasn't just annoyance, but concern. "Strange," he muttered. Elena's aunt had long since gone to bed, trusting Gabriel to keep watch. The clock ticked steadily, each second marking the uneasy crawl of time. Elena hugged the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Is it always like this?" she asked softly. Gabriel looked at her, his expression gentler now. "Like what?" "Like the world waiting for something bad to happen." For a moment, he didn't answer. He had seen too much in his years as a federal detective to deny the truth in her words. Finally, he said, "Not always. But when it is, you listen to the signs." As if on cue, the lights flickered. A quick shudder. Then another. The lamp on the table sputtered, casting the room into momentary darkness before humming back to life. Elena startled, clutching the blanket. Shadow rose instantly, muscles tightening, his body angling toward the front window. His low growl vibrated in the stillness. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. He set his phone down and moved toward the door with quiet steps, his movements fluid, controlled. "Stay here," he told Elena, his voice steady but clipped. "But stay. Shadow's with you." The dog didn't need prompting. He shifted closer to Elena, positioning himself between her and the door, his eyes fixed on the glass, as though something waited beyond it. Another flicker. This time the lights went completely out, plunging the house into darkness. Elena's breath hitched. The ticking of the clock stopped, leaving the silence unnervingly complete. Gabriel slid a flashlight from his coat pocket, its narrow beam cutting through the dark. He moved toward the windows, careful not to brush the curtains aside, scanning for movement outside. "Elena," he said quietly, without turning. "Did you get any strange calls last night?" She hesitated. "No calls. Just the car." As if summoned by her words, the phone on the wall rang. The sound split the silence sharply, too loud, too sudden. Elena flinched. Shadow barked once, deep and resonant, his body tense as a drawn bowstring. Gabriel crossed the room in 2 strides, lifting the receiver. "Hello?" His voice carried the weight of authority. Static hissed on the other end. Then, faintly, like a whisper dragged across broken glass, came a voice. "She has it." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Who is this?" The line went dead. He lowered the phone slowly, his knuckles white against the receiver. Turning, he saw Elena's wide, frightened eyes watching him. He forced calm into his voice. It was nothing. Just interference. But Shadow knew better. The dog barked again, sharp, warning, his gaze never leaving the front door. Gabriel crouched by the couch, his face level with Elena's. "Listen to me. If I tell you to move, you move. If Shadow pulls you, you follow him." "Understand?" She nodded quickly, clutching the blanket to her chest. Gabriel rose and slipped silently toward the back door, flashlight off now, relying on the dim glow of the moon filtering through the windows. He checked locks, tested windows, scanning the yard for any sign of movement. His instincts screamed, not paranoia, but the sharpened sense of a man who had lived too long in the company of danger. Outside, the street looked quiet. Too quiet. No cars passed, no dogs barked in neighboring yards. Only stillness, heavy and unnatural. Back inside, Shadow prowled the living room, his nose brushing the air, growls rumbling low in his throat. He stopped suddenly at the window, staring into the dark, ears pinned forward. Gabriel returned to his side, peering out from the narrow gap between the curtains. Across the street, near the lamppost, he saw it, the faint outline of a vehicle, dark and unmoving, the same one Eleanor had described. His pulse quickened. He placed a hand on Shadow's back. The dog's body trembled with restraint, every instinct ready to launch if given the chance. Gabriel pulled back the curtain slowly, just enough to watch. The car remained still, silent, but he could feel the weight of eyes behind the tinted glass. After a long moment, the headlights flared. The car rolled forward, deliberate, its tires whispering against the pavement. It passed the house slowly, almost mockingly, before disappearing into the night. Gabriel let the curtain fall. He exhaled slowly, then looked at Elena. She sat rigid on the couch, her small hands gripping Shadow's fur as though he were the only thing tethering her to safety. "It's starting," she whispered. Gabriel didn't deny it. Instead, he reached for his phone again, already planning their next move. "Then, we'll be ready." Shadow settled back at Elena's feet, though his eyes stayed fixed on the door. His body remained alert, every breath a silent promise. The first warning had been given, and he would not allow the danger to breach these walls unnoticed. The house was heavy with silence, the kind that only comes after fear has worn everyone too thin to speak. Past midnight, the neighborhood outside seemed to sleep, but inside, no one truly rested. Elena lay curled beneath her blanket, eyes wide open in the dark. The USB rested beneath her pillow, her fingers brushing its cold edge now and then, as if to reassure herself it hadn't vanished. Shadow lay at the foot of her bed, his ears twitching at every creak of the settling house, his chest rising and falling in quiet rhythm. Down the hall, Gabriel sat in the armchair near the window, his pistol holstered at his side, phone on the table, jacket draped nearby. He hadn't closed his eyes once. Men like him didn't sleep when threats lingered so close. He had been waiting, listening, his instincts telling him the night was far from over. The first sound was faint, glass shifting against its frame. Shadow's ears shot up. He growled low, his body rigid, eyes trained on the darkened window. Gabriel was already moving. He rose silently, signaling with one hand for Elena to stay where she was. But the warning was too late. The living room window shattered. The crash of glass split the silence, spraying shards across the carpet. A masked figure climbed through, heavy boots crunching down on the fragments. Two more shadows followed behind him, dark shapes pressing through the opening with quick, practiced movements. "Elena, closet!" Gabriel barked, his voice sharp, commanding. Eleanor scrambled from her bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. She clutched the USB, ran for the small closet in the corner, and slammed the door shut. The darkness inside was suffocating, the smell of mothballs thick, but she wrapped herself around the device, pressing it against her chest as if her heartbeat could shield it. The intruder nearest the hallway took 2 steps before Shadow launched. The dog exploded into motion, a blur of muscle and fury. His snarl ripped through the house, primal and terrifying. He collided with the masked man, full force, teeth clamping down on the attacker's arm. The man screamed, his weapon clattering to the floor. Gabriel moved with equal speed. He lunged, kicking the weapon away, his hand gripping the man's shoulder. He twisted hard, driving him to the ground with a brutal precision that spoke of long years in combat and law enforcement. The second intruder swung a crowbar toward Gabriel's head, but Shadow was faster. Releasing the first man, he spun and lunged, teeth flashing. He hit the second attacker at the thigh, dragging him down before the weapon could strike. The man's grunt of pain was drowned by Shadow's growls, the sound vibrating with lethal intent. Gabriel drew his pistol, leveling it at the third figure still half inside the broken window. "Don't move." His voice cracked like thunder in the dark. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. But the intruder hesitated only long enough to weigh his odds. Then he lunged forward, pulling a blade from his belt. The room erupted into chaos. Gabriel fired once, the gunshot deafening in the enclosed space. The intruder dropped to the floor, clutching his leg, the knife spinning from his hand. "Stay down!" Gabriel roared. Shadow's snarls filled the house as he held one man pinned beneath his weight, teeth bared inches from the attacker's face. The other intruder writhed on the carpet, clutching his arm where Shadow had bitten deep. In the closet, Elena covered her ears, her whole body trembling. The gunshot still rang in her head, the growls shaking the thin wooden door she pressed her back against. She wanted to scream, to run, but her mother's words echoed in her memory. "Trust your uncle. Protect this with your life." So she stayed, clutching the USB so tightly, her nails bit into her palm. Gabriel moved quickly, kicking the crowbar further away, his pistol never wavering. He grabbed the nearest man by the collar, slamming him back against the wall. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The attacker only groaned, blood seeping from his sleeve. Shadow snarled louder, jaws clamped tighter until the second man froze, terrified. The dog's eyes burned with fury, yet beneath it was purpose. He wasn't attacking blindly. He was protecting, guarding, holding the line. Outside, a car engine roared. Tires screeched against asphalt. The sound grew fainter, fading into the distance. Whoever had been waiting outside had fled, leaving their men behind. Gabriel cursed under his breath. Reinforcements would come. This was only the beginning. "Elena," he called, his tone steady now. "It's safe. Come out." The closet door creaked open slowly. Elena stepped into the room, her small frame shaking, eyes wide with terror. She clutched the USB to her chest like it was life itself. Her gaze darted to the shattered window, the men groaning on the floor, Shadow standing guard with his chest heaving. "They were here for this," she whispered, holding up the drive. Her voice was raw, trembling. "They know." Gabriel holstered his weapon and crossed to her. He knelt, placing both hands gently on her shoulders. His voice softened. "I know, but you did exactly what you had to do. You kept it safe, and you're not alone." Shadow padded over, pressing his massive head against Elena's leg. The girl dropped to her knees, burying her face in his fur. For the first time since the funeral, her sobs weren't silent. They shook through her whole body, spilling out against the dog who refused to let her go. Gabriel stood again, his eyes cold now, fixed on the broken window. He knew what this meant. The enemy had stopped watching. They were ready to take, and he knew, deep down, that this was only the first night. The night was still vibrating from the gunshot when Gabriel heard it, the engine outside, revving in panic, tires screeching as the car tore down the street. He glanced at Elena, still clutching Shadow's fur with wide, tear-soaked eyes. His voice was firm, urgent, but not unkind. "Stay inside. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Elena nodded, her small face pale, trembling. She clutched the USB in her fist so tightly, her knuckles turned white. Shadow looked from Gabriel to her, unwilling to leave. But Gabriel's sharp hand signal was enough. The dog's ears flicked, his body coiling like a spring. He was ready. Gabriel shoved his pistol back into its holster, yanked open the front door, and vanished into the rain. Shadow bounded after him, paws pounding the wet pavement. The night had turned stormy, fat drops of rain splattering against the ground, the sky split with occasional streaks of lightning. The car had already rounded the corner. Gabriel sprinted, his boots slamming against the slick asphalt, his breath sharp in his chest. He wasn't young anymore, but adrenaline had a way of sharpening the body, lending strength when the stakes were life and death. "Shadow! Track!" he barked. The German shepherd surged ahead, nose close to the ground, body cutting through the night like a living compass. His bark rang once, deep and commanding, before he disappeared into a side alley. Gabriel followed without hesitation, his flashlight beam slicing across graffiti-stained brick walls and overflowing trash bins. The rain made the world shine dangerously. Slick puddles, the gleam of neon signs reflecting in fractured pools of water. The alley twisted left, then right, narrowing until Gabriel had to brush against damp brick as he ran. Somewhere ahead, boots pounded against the ground. Two men, running fast, their shadows dancing when lightning flashed. Shadow's growl rolled through the alley before his body appeared, lunging at the nearer of the two fleeing men. He collided with the attacker's back, teeth sinking into the thick fabric of his jacket. The man let out a hoarse scream, crashing face first into a puddle. Gabriel closed the distance, his hand gripping the man's wrist just as he tried to reach for a weapon. With practiced precision, Gabriel twisted hard, sending the knife clattering across the wet concrete. Shadow didn't let go, holding the man pinned with sheer strength, his snarls vibrating against the alley walls. The second attacker didn't stop. He glanced back once, his mask soaked with rain, before vanishing deeper into the maze of alleys. Gabriel cursed under his breath, his instincts warring between pursuit and consolidation. He made the call, secure what they had. He pressed his knee into the pinned man's shoulder, forcing him flat against the pavement. The man spat curses, thrashing, but Shadow's growl kept him in check. Gabriel searched quickly, his hand running across the man's pockets. He pulled out a sleek black device no bigger than a deck of cards. Its surface gleamed under the flashlight, the rain washing over it. A single word was etched in sharp metallic letters across the casing. Aegis. Gabriel's breath caught for a fraction of a second. He'd heard the whispers, seen the files that vanished before reaching daylight. Aegis was no street gang, no small-time syndicate. It was something deeper, buried in the shadows of government and power. And now, it had a hand in Amelia's death. The man snarled beneath him, "Give it back. You don't know what you're holding." Gabriel's grip tightened. "You're right," he said coldly. "I don't, but I know enough." He pocketed the device, then pulled his cuffs free, snapping them around the attacker's wrists with quick efficiency. The man resisted, but Shadow's teeth near his neck kept him from pushing too far. For a moment the rain softened, the world narrowed to the sound of it hissing against rooftops, the ragged breathing of the man on the ground, and Shadow's steady growl. Gabriel stared down at the word Aegis burning like fire in his mind. "Shadow, off," he ordered. The dog released reluctantly, stepping back but staying close, his body tense, ready for the slightest provocation. His eyes never left the man. The attacker laughed suddenly, bitter and hollow. "You think you've stopped something? This is just the beginning. You don't even know what she left that girl." Gabriel froze, every muscle locked. The confirmation he hadn't wanted to hear. They knew about Elena. He yanked the man upright, dragging him a few feet until his back slammed against the wall. "Who's giving the orders?" Gabriel's voice was ice. The man only sneered, blood dripping from a cut above his brow. "You can't stop Aegis. They'll take it. And when they do, you'll wish you'd never." Before he could finish, another gunshot cracked the night. Not from Gabriel's weapon, but somewhere deeper in the alley. The sound echoed between the walls. Gabriel dropped low, pulling the attacker with him as cover. Shadow barked furiously, his body pressed against Gabriel's leg, eyes darting toward the source of the shot. But when Gabriel looked again, the second man was gone, vanished. The pinned attacker had gone pale, realization dawning in his eyes. "They're not here to rescue me," he muttered. Fear cracked his voice. Gabriel understood. Loose ends. Aegis didn't leave them. Another gunshot. This time, closer. The man slumped suddenly in Gabriel's grip, his body jerking before going limp. Blood spread across his chest. Somewhere in the darkness, footsteps retreated, quick and purposeful, leaving silence in their wake. Gabriel cursed, lowering the body gently to the ground. Shadow sniffed at the fallen man, then growled low, unsettled. The device in Gabriel's pocket felt heavier now, as though it carried not just technology, but death itself. He straightened, rain sliding down his face, and met Shadow's watchful eyes. "Come on, boy," he murmured. His voice was quiet, heavy with the weight of what had just unfolded. "We've seen enough for tonight." Together they turned back, retracing their steps through the rain-slick alleys. Eleanor was waiting, and if Aegis knew, then the real fight was only just beginning. By the time Gabriel and Shadow returned, the rain had slowed to a thin drizzle, the storm easing but leaving the streets slick and glistening under pale street lamps. Gabriel's coat clung to him, heavy with water, and his boots left muddy streaks across the porch as he pushed open the front door. Shadow padded in silently behind him, his fur darkened with rain, droplets sliding down his strong frame. Inside, the house felt different, the kind of silence that follows violence. Eleanor was waiting in the living room, huddled on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her aunt hovered nearby, pale and shaken, but it was Elena's eyes Gabriel saw first, wide, red-rimmed, and fixed on the broken window, as though expecting more shadows to climb through. When she saw him, her body jerked as if relief and fear collided all at once. "Uncle," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're back." Gabriel crossed the room quickly, crouching in front of her. He placed a steady hand on her small shoulder, his presence solid, grounding. Shadow immediately pressed against her legs, curling at her feet like a living barrier. "I'm here," Gabriel said. His voice was calm, though his own heart was still pounding with the echoes of the chase, the memory of the dying man's words. "You're safe." But the reassurance felt fragile. The broken glass on the floor, the boards he'd nailed hastily across the window, they all told a different story. Eleanor clutched the blanket tighter, her small frame trembling beneath it. Gabriel lowered himself onto the couch beside her. For a long moment, he said nothing, letting the silence stretch. He had learned over the years that sometimes children spoke only when the quiet gave them room. Sure enough, Eleanor's lips parted, her voice so soft it was nearly swallowed by the hush. "They were here for the USB." Gabriel nodded once. Yes. She turned her face toward him, her eyes glistening, searching. Her lower lip trembled before she whispered the question that had lived inside her since the funeral. "They killed her, didn't they?" The words hung in the air, heavy and unflinching. Gabriel felt them strike deep. He wanted to deny it, to protect her from the full truth, to wrap her in the shield of innocence she still should have had. But he couldn't. He saw Amelia's handwriting in that note, her urgency, her fear. He saw the device in his pocket branded with Aegis, and he saw the blood on the man's chest in the alley. He couldn't lie. Not to this child who had already lost too much. His jaw tightened. He exhaled slowly, then placed a hand over hers. Yes, he said quietly. They did. Elena's face crumpled, a sob shuddering through her chest. She turned, burying her face against Shadow's thick fur. The dog didn't move, only pressed closer, his steady warmth absorbing every tremor of her grief. His dark eyes flicked up at Gabriel as if to say, "I've got her." Gabriel swallowed hard, his throat aching. He rested a hand gently on Elena's back, feeling how small she was, how her shoulders shook beneath his palm. He thought of Amelia, brilliant, fearless Amelia, and how she had left the world too soon, leaving her daughter with secrets that weighed heavier than any child should carry. Minutes passed like that, Elena sobbing quietly into Shadow's fur, Shadow steady and silent, Gabriel sitting beside them with the weight of truth pressing down on all of them. Finally, Elena lifted her face, her cheeks streaked with tears. Her eyes found Gabriel's again, and there was something different in them now. Pain, yes, but also resolve. "Then we have to stop them," she whispered. Her voice shook, but the words were clear, fierce. Gabriel studied her, torn between pride and sorrow. She was so young, yet already carrying the fire of her mother's will. "We will," he said firmly. "But first, we keep you safe. That's the most important thing." Elena clutched the USB in her hand, the metal biting into her palm. She nodded, though her expression said she understood safety was fragile now, perhaps even temporary. Her aunt entered then, setting a steaming mug of tea on the table. Her hands trembled slightly, her face pale. "I think she needs rest," the woman said softly. Gabriel nodded, though he knew rest wouldn't come easy. "I'll stay up. Shadow too. No one gets near this house without us knowing." Elena leaned back against the couch, exhaustion tugging at her. Shadow curled tighter at her feet, his head resting on her lap. She stroked his ears slowly, her breathing evening out. For the first time that night, she let her eyes close, trusting the dog to keep watch. Gabriel sat in the armchair opposite, his pistol on the table, the strange device from the alley heavy in his pocket. He stared at the boards covering the shattered window, listening to the rain tapping faintly against them. His instinct screamed that this was only the beginning. And yet, in the stillness of that room, with Elena asleep and Shadow's steady breathing filling the silence, he allowed himself one small thought. Amelia hadn't died in vain. Her daughter survived tonight, and with him and Shadow beside her, she would not face the darkness alone. The city looked different at night. Harsher, sharper, as though every shadow carried a secret. Gabriel drove with steady hands, his eyes flicking between the rain-smeared windshield and the rearview mirror. He hadn't told Elena much, only that they were going to see an old friend who might help. She sat quietly in the back seat, Shadow pressed close against her side, his head resting on her lap, her small hand tangled in his fur like it was the only anchor she had left. They reached a narrow side street, tucked behind a row of shuttered shops. Gabriel parked in front of a building whose windows glowed faintly with bluish light. From the outside it looked abandoned, bricks chipped, a metal door streaked with rust. But Gabriel knew better. He knocked twice in a deliberate rhythm, then once more after a pause. The locks clicked. The door swung open. "Ward," a man's voice said, dry with surprise. "Haven't seen you in years." Inside stood a wiry man with thinning hair and glasses smudged from long hours at screens. His name was Ethan Moore, once a federal systems analyst, now officially retired, though anyone who knew him understood retirement was just another cover. Gabriel gave a curt nod. "I need your help, and it can't wait." Moore's gaze drifted to the girl and the German shepherd beside her. Elena shrank back instinctively, but Shadow stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the stranger. Moore raised his hands lightly, signaling peace. "You brought company. Must be serious." Gabriel didn't answer. He pulled the USB from his coat and placed it on the table inside. "See what you can find." Moore's eyes narrowed. He picked it up, turning it in his fingers. "Military grade?" "Worse," Gabriel muttered. The room smelled faintly of coffee gone cold and warm circuitry. Screens lined the walls, casting pale light across stacks of wires and half-built machines. Moore sat at the central console, inserting the USB into a port. Elena edged closer, Shadow never leaving her side, his amber eyes following every movement. The screen lit up instantly with lines of encrypted code. Layers upon layers scrolled faster than Elena could follow. To her, it looked like gibberish, but she saw the way Moore's jaw tightened. "This isn't standard encryption," he murmured. "It's adaptive. Like it knows I'm trying to open it." He typed quickly, lines of code spilling across the monitor. "Every time I break through one barrier, another one builds itself." Gabriel leaned over his shoulder. "Can you get in?" Moore shook his head slightly. "Not with brute force. Whoever built this didn't want it cracked by machines. This is something else. Smarter. Personal." Eleanor hugged her arms around herself, her throat tight. She thought of her mother's handwriting, the urgency in her note. "Trust only your uncle. Protect this with your life." Amelia hadn't trusted her colleagues. She hadn't trusted the government. She had trusted her 12-year-old daughter. "Wait," Moore said suddenly. His fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up a diagnostic scan. "Look at this. There's a biometric lock buried inside the code." Gabriel frowned. "Biometric?" Moore nodded. "Not fingerprints, not retina scans. This is neural mapping. It's tied to someone's brainwave patterns." He glanced at Gabriel, his eyes sharp behind the glasses. "This thing won't open unless it recognizes the mind it was built for." The room went very still. Gabriel felt the weight of the truth settle before anyone said it aloud. He turned, his eyes falling on Eleanor. She stood frozen in the pale light, her face pale, her eyes wide. Shadow pressed against her leg, sensing her fear, a low rumble rising in his chest. Moore spoke gently, almost reluctantly. "Ward, this key was designed for a child. For her." Eleanor shook her head quickly. "No, I can't. I don't know how." Gabriel crouched in front of her, his voice steady, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Listen to me, Eleanor. Your mother built this for a reason. She trusted you with it. That means she believed you could do it." Tears welled in her eyes. "But what if I can't? What if I make it worse?" Shadow nudged her hand with his nose, a quiet push, as if urging her forward. The warmth of his breath steadied her more than words ever could. Gabriel held her gaze. "You don't have to be afraid. I'll be right here. Shadow too. You're not alone." For a long moment, Elena didn't move. Then, slowly, she stepped toward the console. Moore slid aside, clearing space for her. She climbed into the chair, her small frame dwarfed by the glowing screens. Moore adjusted the interface. "Place your hand on the pad here, and just focus. Don't force it. The system will know." Her hand trembled as she lowered it onto the scanner. The pad pulsed faintly with light, scanning the ridges of her skin, then humming as a thin band rested gently against her temple. The code on the screen shivered. Then, for the first time, something changed. Layers peeled back, slow and deliberate, as if the machine were recognizing her presence. Folders opened, not fully, but enough to reveal fragments. A video window flickered to life. On screen, Amelia's face appeared. She looked tired, older than Elena remembered, her hair pulled back, her eyes shadowed by worry. Yet when she spoke, Her voice was steady. "If you're watching this," Amelia said, "then I am gone, and it is up to you now." She paused, her eyes softening. "Elena, my love, only you can open what I've built. No one else. Trust Gabriel. Trust Shadow. And remember, the truth is dangerous, but silence is worse." Elena's breath hitched. Tears blurred her vision as she reached out, pressing her fingers to the screen. "Mom," she whispered. The video cut off abruptly, the files locking again. The console went dark. Moore sat back heavily. She was right. It's keyed entirely to her. He looked at Gabriel, his voice grim. "Without this child, no one can unlock the rest. And that means every enemy she had will be hunting her now." The room fell into silence. The only sound was the steady hum of machines and the soft, protective growl of Shadow as he pressed closer to Elena, his body between her and the door. Gabriel's jaw tightened. He reached for Elena's hand, gripping it firmly. "Then we'll protect her, whatever it takes." Elena looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, but in her eyes burned something new, not just grief, but the first flicker of resolve. The room was dim, except for the glow of monitors, pale light flickering across walls stacked with cables and silent machines. The USB still pulsed faintly in the console, like a heart beating against glass. Elena sat in the chair, her small frame dwarfed by the high-backed seat, her hand still trembling from the earlier scan. Gabriel hovered behind her, a steady presence, while Shadow lay at her feet, his ears pricked, eyes locked on every shadow in the room. Moore leaned forward, typing commands that scrolled endlessly across the screen. "It shouldn't have stopped like that," he muttered, frustration etched into his voice. "The system recognized her, opened a gate, and then shut it down again." Gabriel frowned. "Why?" Moore glanced over his shoulder. "Because it doesn't want me. It wants her." Eleanor's heart skipped. She looked from the glowing keyboard to the silent video window that had flickered out only moments ago. Her mother's face, tired, worn, but still hers, had been there, speaking directly to her. Her throat tightened. "What do I do?" she whispered. Moore pointed toward the keyboard. "Touch it. Not the scanner this time. The keys. Just be present. If this is biometric at the neural level, it may be listening for patterns beyond fingerprints, impulses, synapses, the way her brain processes interaction." It sounded like science fiction, but Elena remembered her mother's words. "Only you can open what I've built." She drew in a shaky breath, then reached forward, her fingertips brushing the smooth keys. The system shuddered awake. Lines of code peeled back like layers of paper tearing, collapsing to reveal new windows. Lights across the console flickered, the machines humming louder. Elena flinched but didn't pull away. Her fingers hovered, then pressed down on a single key. The screen blinked. A video box opened, static at first, then sharpening into an image. Her mother appeared. Not the Amelia Cross the world remembered, polished, brilliant, commanding in a lab coat, but the Amelia who had been worn down by fear. Her hair was pulled back messily, her face pale, her eyes lined with exhaustion. And yet, when she looked into the camera, her gaze carried the same intensity Eleanor had known all her life. "If this recording is playing," Amelia began, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "Then I am no longer alive. And the truth must pass to you, my daughter." Elena's breath hitched. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the screen. She pressed her palm against it, as though she could reach through the glass and touch her mother's face. Shadow shifted at her feet, sensing her trembling, resting his chin on her lap, as if grounding her. Amelia continued. "I was part of a project called Aegis Pathogen Directive. We began with the promise of saving lives, a cure that could adapt to any disease, rewriting itself to fight infection in real time. But it was corrupted, weaponized. It became a pathogen that doesn't heal. It kills, efficiently, quietly. Entire populations could be erased in weeks." Gabriel's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists. He had suspected something of this magnitude, but hearing Amelia say it in her own voice twisted the truth into reality. Amelia's voice faltered for the first time. She leaned closer to the camera, her eyes shimmering with pain. "I tried to stop them. I sabotaged the prototypes, delayed trials, hid data. But Aegis is everywhere. They killed my colleagues, and when I knew they would come for me, I hid the key in the only place they could never reach. You, Elena." The girl's sob escaped before she could hold it back. Her hands trembled on the keyboard. "Mom." On screen, Amelia's expression softened. It wasn't just a scientist speaking now, but a mother. "You are the only one who can open the files fully. I mapped the encryption to your neural patterns, not because you are a scientist, but because you are my child. They cannot manipulate you. They cannot predict you. That is your strength." The weight of those words pressed down on Elena's chest. Her heart pounded painfully, her small hands clenching into fists. Only her. Her mother had chosen her. And now she understood why the men in the masks had come, why the black car lingered outside, why Shadow never stopped growling at the USB. Amelia's gaze darkened again, urgency returning. "Listen carefully, Elena. There will be people who tell you they can protect you if you give them the drive. Do not believe them. Even those you trust may be compromised. The only ones you can truly rely on are Gabriel and Shadow." Elena's eyes flicked downward. The shepherd's gaze met hers, unblinking, steady, as if confirming her mother's words. Amelia's voice cracked now, her strength fading. "If Aegis succeeds, there will be no stopping them. You must not let this pathogen see the light of day. Promise me, Elena, promise me you will keep it safe." The screen glitched, the image breaking into static. Amelia's final words fought through distortion. "Only Elena can unlock the rest." Then the video collapsed into darkness. The code sealed itself again, the screen returning to the endless scroll of encrypted walls. Elena sat frozen, her chest heaving, her face streaked with tears. The room felt colder, heavier, as though her mother's ghost lingered in the silence. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, but the tremor in her fingers didn't stop. Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and firm. "You heard her," he said quietly. His voice wasn't gentle now. It was iron. "This is bigger than us. But she trusted you. That means you can do this. And I'll make damn sure you live long enough to finish what she started." Moore leaned back, pale, his hands trembling slightly on the keyboard. "Ward, you realize what this means? If word of this leaks, if Aegis finds out she's the key—" "They already know." Gabriel cut in, his voice low, final. "That's why they're coming after her." Elena curled her hand protectively over Shadow's head, her fingers tangling in his fur. She whispered brokenly, more to herself than anyone else. "I promised, Mom. I'll keep it safe." And though the words shook, Shadow's quiet, steady breath against her lap made them feel stronger than steel. The monitors had gone dark, leaving the room washed in a cold silence, broken only by the faint hum of the machines cooling down. The ghost of Amelia's voice still seemed to hang in the air, echoing through the wires and cables, like it had been stitched into the circuits themselves. Elena sat frozen in the chair, her small hands still pressed against the keyboard, though the screens no longer responded to her touch. Her chest rose and fell too fast, shallow breaths struggling to steady themselves. Her mother's face, tired, resolute, whispering words only she could hear, played on a loop in her mind. Gabriel stood a few feet behind her, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. He had seen hardened agents crumble under less. He wanted to reach out, but he knew that timing mattered. He couldn't smother her with comfort. Not now. Elena's hands suddenly clenched into fists, slamming against the keyboard with a hollow thud. "Why me?" The words burst from her throat, sharp and broken. She shoved the chair back, spinning around to face Gabriel. Her eyes were wet, blazing with fury. "Why would she do this to me? I'm just a kid. I can't stop any of this." Gabriel opened his mouth, but she cut him off, her voice rising, trembling with rage. "She knew they would come for me. She knew I'd be hunted, chased, scared every second. And she still put it all on me." Her fists shook at her sides. She didn't care what would happen to me. She just wanted to save her work. Her words splintered into sobs, her body collapsing onto the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest, burying her face between them. "I hate her for it," she whispered. "I hate her for leaving me." The silence that followed was raw, jagged. Gabriel felt the words strike him deep, not because they were true, but because he remembered the same rage in himself years ago, when the job had taken everything from him. He crouched near her, keeping his voice steady. "Elena, your mother didn't abandon you. She gave you the only weapon she had against them. Herself. Through you. She trusted you because she knew you were stronger than you realize." But Elena shook her head violently. "No, I'm not strong. I'm scared all the time. I couldn't even scream when they came through the window. I just hid. And now she wants me to stop some weapon that could kill everyone. I can't. I can't." Her voice broke on the last word. She struck the floor weakly with her fist, the sound dull against the concrete. Shadow moved then. Quietly, without hesitation, he padded to her side. He lowered himself to the ground, stretching his body alongside hers. His head rested on her arm, the weight steady, warm. He didn't whine. He didn't push. He simply lay there, his breathing deep, his presence solid. Elena felt the fur against her skin, the quiet rhythm of his heartbeat through his chest. She tried to shove him away, her hands pressing against his flank. "Go. Don't you dare pity me," she choked. But Shadow didn't move. He stayed, his dark eyes unblinking, patient. Her strength broke. Her hands curled into his coat instead of pushing him. Her sobs spilled into the fur, soaking it. The dog shifted only enough to press closer, his body curved around her small frame, as if he could shield her from the entire world. Gabriel watched, his throat tight. He had seen partners break down in war zones, had seen men crumble under fear. But there was something sharper in watching a child fight against a burden she never asked for. He wanted to promise her it would end, that she could be free of it. But he couldn't. So he let Shadow do what even he couldn't. Be the quiet that absorbs every scream, the steady presence that doesn't flinch under grief. Minutes passed. Elena's sobs slowed, her breathing evening into hiccuped gasps. She didn't lift her head, but her words slipped out, muffled against Shadow's fur. "If I fail, if I mess this up, everyone dies." That's what she said. Gabriel spoke gently but firmly. "If you fall, I'll catch you. If you mess up, I'll fix it. You're not alone in this, Elena. Not as long as I'm here. Not as long as he's here." He nodded toward the dog. "You've got more strength around you than most armies." Elena lifted her face just enough to look at Shadow. His eyes met hers, calm, unwavering, carrying something human in their depth. She felt the steadiness there, the wordless loyalty that no betrayal, no enemy, no shadow could touch. Her voice cracked again. "What if they take me?" Shadow shifted, pressing his head harder against her chest as if answering for himself. Gabriel leaned closer, his tone iron now. "Then they'll have to go through him, and through me. And I promise you, Elena, they won't." For the first time, a flicker of calm slipped into her expression. Her hands tightened gently in Shadow's coat, her body leaning into him, exhausted. The anger hadn't vanished, but the edge of despair dulled. Moore, who had been silent at his console, finally spoke, his voice careful. "She's stronger than she knows. Amelia wasn't wrong." Gabriel didn't answer. He only watched Elena, a child collapsed against the fur of a dog who would rather die than let her go. And in the quiet of that dim room, amid the hum of machines and the weight of secrets, Gabriel made a silent vow. Whatever this fight demanded, he would carry it, so Elena wouldn't have to carry it alone. The basement smelled of rust and damp concrete, air heavy with the memory of old blood. A single bulb swung above a man tied to a chair, wrists raw from rope, face swollen and broken. He had once been sharp, a mid-level analyst who thought he could betray Aegis and survive. The door creaked. Boots echoed against the floor. A tall man in a dark suit stepped in, his presence filling the space. What drew the prisoner's eye wasn't the suit, but the silver ring on his right hand, carved into a coiled serpent that flashed in the bulb's weak light. The man stopped close, his voice calm, polite, edged with steel. "You thought you could hide it from us." "I didn't." The fist cut his words short, driving the air from his lungs. The serpent pressed against his cheek as the enforcer leaned close. "Do not insult me with lies. Dr. Amelia Cross is dead, but she left something, a key, and her 12-year-old daughter has it." The prisoner's lips trembled. "You'll never find her." The enforcer smiled faintly, cold as stone. He slid a dagger free, letting the ring slide down its hilt with a metallic tap. "You misunderstand me. We already will. The question is whether your death will be quick or an example." The prisoner's voice cracked. She trusted only her brother, Gabriel Ward. The name hung in the air like a match to gasoline. The enforcer straightened, sliding the dagger away. "Dispose of him," he ordered. Two masked men emerged from the shadows. The captive's muffled cries were cut short. Alone, the man with the serpent ring dialed a number. His voice remained calm, as though ordering dinner. "The files are with the daughter. Protected by Ward. Send everyone. Alive, if possible. If not," he flexed his hand, the serpent gleaming, "erase her." He pocketed the phone and left the basement silent, but for the drip of blood and the swaying bulb. "One child," he murmured, "and the world trembles." The motel sat on the edge of town, neon lights buzzing half-dead above peeling paint. Inside, the room was dim, a single lamp spilling weak light across thin curtains. Eleanor sat by the window, her chin on folded arms, backpack close. Inside lay the USB her mother had slipped to her before dying. Her silence was no longer numb. It carried the weight of a storm. Shadow, the German shepherd, lay at her feet, still but alert. Gabriel Ward paced the room, eyes tracking exits, every instinct on edge. He had lived through ambushes before, but tonight, his first warning came not from himself, but from Shadow. The dog stiffened, ears pricking, a low growl rumbling through the air, his amber eyes locked on the ceiling. Eleanor startled. "What is it?" Gabriel's pulse tightened. He snapped off the lamp, plunging the room into near darkness. The neon glow from outside barely lit their faces. He heard it then, too, a faint metallic hum drifting above the roof. Drones. He cursed under his breath, pulling the curtain just enough to glimpse a shadow skimming the parking lot. Metal wings glinted once before vanishing. "They've found us," Gabriel said flatly. Eleanor hugged herself, her voice a whisper. "Are they watching me?" He didn't lie. "Yes, that's why we can't stay here." A beam of light scanned across the curtain like a finger. Eleanor gasped, but Shadow moved instantly, planting himself between her and the glass, barking sharp and furious until the beam cut away. "They're marking the room," Gabriel muttered grimly. He pulled open his duffel, tossing in ammunition, maps, and cash. "We leave now." Shadow barked again, snapping his head toward the ceiling vent. A tiny red blink pulsed behind the slats. Gabriel fired once, sparks showering. The light died. Silence followed. Then the drone hum receded into the night. For now, they are gone. But the message was clear. Aegis knew exactly where they were. Eleanor's face was pale, eyes wide. "They won't stop, will they?" "No," Gabriel said, crouching to meet her eyes. "They won't, but neither will we." Shadow pressed his nose into her hand, grounding her with warmth. She clung to his fur, finding her courage in his steady presence. The silence after the drones was heavier than the hum had been. Gabriel packed quickly, movements precise. Eleanor sat on the bed, clutching her backpack. Shadow pressed against her legs. Shadow stiffened again, this time toward the floorboards. His growl deepened, vibrating like a warning bell. Gabriel froze. That wasn't suspicion, it was certainty. "Out!" he snapped, dragging Eleanor to her feet. "What is it?" "Bomb." The word stole her breath. Shadow lunged toward the back door, barking furiously. Gabriel yanked the knob, shoving Elena forward, just as the first explosion ripped through the neighboring room. The blast shook the walls, glass shattering, dust raining from the ceiling. Eleanor screamed, but Shadow shoved her legs, forcing her through the gap. They stumbled into the alley as the second blast detonated beneath them. The ground buckled, fire tearing upward. The shockwave knocked Gabriel off his feet, Eleanor sprawling across wet pavement. Shadow saved her again. Teeth gripping her backpack strap, he dragged her clear, just as the back wall collapsed where she'd fallen. Sparks and steel rained down, inches away. "Elena!" Gabriel coughed through smoke, scrambling up. "I'm here!" she cried, clutching Shadow's dust-coated fur. His chest heaved, but his eyes burned with unyielding focus. Gabriel hauled them both up, dragging Elena from the inferno. Fire clawed at the sky, sirens wailing in the distance. He knew rescue would never arrive in time. Aegis would see to that. The third explosion tore through the motel's front office, a fireball lighting the night. The shockwave slammed Gabriel to the ground. He wrapped himself around Elena as debris rained down. Shadow skidded beside them, claws scraping sparks, his body planted like a shield against the blaze. For a moment, only ringing filled Gabriel's ears. Smoke thickened, his lungs burned. Elena trembled, tears streaking her ash-stained face. "They wanted us gone," she whispered. Gabriel tightened his grip on her shoulders. And they failed. Because of him. Shadow stood beside them, panting, his body white with plaster dust, eyes still scanning outward. He had been the first to sense, the first to move. And without him, Elena would have been a name swallowed by rubble. Elena collapsed to her knees, throwing her arms around the German shepherd's neck. Her sobs buried in his fur. Shadow didn't flinch, didn't move. He only stood, enduring her grip with the patience of a soldier. Gabriel looked back once at the motel. Flames roared skyward, smoke a beacon for every enemy already closing in. Every second here was a risk. He lifted Elena gently, his voice steady. "We can't stay. They'll come back for bodies." She nodded, wiping her face, still clinging to Shadow, as he guided her forward. Together, they vanished into the night. Behind them, the motel collapsed in fire and ruin, the neon sign flickering weakly before falling into the blaze. Gabriel's hand brushed his pistol as he scanned the shadows. One truth seared through the smoke. Aegis wasn't watching anymore. They were striking, and the war had only just begun. The safe house Helena Cruz chose wasn't much to look at. A weathered bungalow sagging at the edge of a forgotten neighborhood. To strangers, it was invisible. To Gabriel, it was exactly what he expected. Helena had always favored places that disappeared in plain sight. He parked 2 houses down, scanning the street before motioning for Elena to stay low. Shadow pressed tight against her leg, nose twitching at the damp air. The girl clutched her backpack, the USB hidden inside, her wide eyes flicking between Gabriel and the shepherd, as if they were the only solid things left in her world. Gabriel knocked twice, paused, then once more. An old rhythm. From their days when badges meant loyalty, not betrayal. The door cracked. A single dark eye studied him, then the chain slid free. Helena Cruz stood framed in the dim light. Older now, hair streaked with grey, lines carved by secrets and survival. But her presence was unchanged, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Ward," she said simply. "Cruz." Gabriel nodded. "We need to talk." Her gaze slipped past him to the girl and the dog. Something softened. She stepped aside. "Come in." Inside smelled of coffee and gun oil. Curtains drawn tight, furniture sparse. A radio scanner buzzed faintly beside stacks of files. Helena moved with the efficiency of someone who never truly retired. Helena sank onto the couch, shadow sprawling across her lap like a living shield, eyes tracking Helena's every step. Helena leaned against the table, arms crossed. "You wouldn't be here unless it was bad." Gabriel placed the USB on the table. Amelia left this, encrypted to her daughter. For a heartbeat, Helena's composure cracked. "So it's true," she murmured. "You knew something." She sat heavily, voice low. "Amelia came to me last year, said she couldn't trust her own team. Reports vanishing, phone logs she never made showing up in files. She believed a mole was inside the agency, feeding Aegis." Elena's head snapped up. "One of the good guys was working for them?" Helena's expression softened. "Not everyone with a badge serves justice, sweetheart. Some serve power." Shadow's growl rumbled, low and steady, as if the truth itself unsettled him. Gabriel pressed. "Did she know who?" Helena shook her head. "No names, only patterns." She said, "The less I knew, the safer I'd be." Gabriel's jaw clenched. Amelia had been isolated long before her death, walled in by betrayal. Helena's gaze hardened. If Aegis knows the girl is the key, they'll come harder. And if the mole is still inside... She left the rest unsaid. Eleanor hugged Shadow tighter, voice trembling. Then we can't trust anyone. Her words, too heavy for 12 years old, fell like iron. Gabriel crouched by her side. That's why we're here. Helena's one of the few I'd still bet my life on. Helena arched her brow. Generous. You never gave trust easily. Neither did you. For a moment, silence bridged their years. Then Helena leaned forward. Your mother wasn't wrong to choose you, child. Aegis can't buy loyalty, and they can't predict that dog. Shadow's tail thumped once against the couch, solemn as an oath. Elena's lip quivered. I don't want to be brave. I just want her back. Helena's eyes softened. That's the curse of people like your mother. They don't leave us choices, only battles. Gabriel pocketed the USB, his voice steel. Then we fight, but this time on the offensive. Helena slid a folder across the table. Amelia left me this trail, not proof. Patterns, people she didn't trust. Gabriel opened it. Names stared back at him, possible traitors. The war was no longer just Aegis in the shadows. It was rot buried deep inside their own ranks. Rain slicked the pavement as Gabriel led Elena down the narrow alley toward the sedan. Neon light fractured in puddles, painting the ground in shards of color. Shadow padded ahead, ears twitching, nose close to the ground. They turned a corner and froze. A man leaned casually against the wall by the car, rain dripping from his coat. Gabriel recognized him instantly. Daniel Keene, a partner from another life. One of the few Gabriel had still left orbit near him. Keene, Gabriel said warily. Keene straightened, a smile too easy on his face. Ward. Long time. Helena said you'd need backup. Thought I'd be on the welcoming committee. Something twisted in Gabriel's gut. Helena hadn't mentioned Keene. She never forgot details. Shadow slid in front of Elena, body rigid, growling and deepening. Gabriel's hand hovered near his holster. We don't need backup. Keene's smile sharpened. No, Gabriel. You need obedience. Hand over the girl. The words cut the rain like glass. Eleanor stiffened, pressing into Shadow. Gabriel drew his pistol, aiming squarely. Step away. Keene's chuckle was hollow. You think you can outrun Aegis? They're inside everything. Your sister thought hiding the key in her daughter was clever. But it's over. Give me the drive, and maybe the girl gets to live. Gabriel's voice dropped, iron hard. You'll have to go through me. That was the plan. Keene lunged. A curved knife flashed neon as it slashed toward Gabriel's chest. He twisted, pistol raised. Too slow, Shadow struck first. The shepherd launched with a snarl that ripped the alley apart. His jaws clamped Keene's wrist, bone crunching under his bite. The knife clattered to the pavement, missing Gabriel by inches. Keene screamed, thrashing, but Shadow dragged him down, pinning him with raw force. Gabriel kicked the knife away and pressed his pistol to Keene's temple. His voice thundered. You were supposed to be one of us. Keene spat blood, face contorted. There is no us, only those who adapt, and those who die. Eleanor's voice broke from behind, small but fierce. Don't let him hurt us. Gabriel didn't waver. He won't, not while we're breathing. Shadow growled deeper, teeth sinking until Keene cried out, strength faltering. Finally, Gabriel yanked the dog back, gripping his collar. Shadow released reluctantly, muzzle wet with blood, body still coiled to strike. Gabriel's boot pressed Keen to the wall. Who else? Who's feeding Aegis? Keen laughed weakly. You'll find out. They're already coming. For a moment, Gabriel almost pulled the trigger. But Elena's wide eyes froze him. She had seen enough death. He slammed Keen against the bricks, leaving him groaning in the rain. Run back to your masters. Tell them this isn't over. As Gabriel turned with Elena under his arm, shadow circling tight, he saw it. Faint, but unmistakable. On Keen's finger glinted a serpent ring. The same serpent that haunted Amelia's warnings. Gabriel's blood ran cold. The serpent wasn't just close, it was inside. Headlights cut through rain as Gabriel drove, jaw locked, images of betrayal burning in his mind. In the rear seat, Elena pressed into shadow, the dog stretched across her like a shield. Her hands twisted in his fur as if to anchor herself. She was silent a long while before whispering, I keep remembering something. Gabriel's gaze flicked to the mirror. What is it? Her brow furrowed, voice fragile but steady. Before she died, Mom took me somewhere. She called it a safe house, but it wasn't a house. It looked like an observatory. In the mountains. Old. Broken. Covered in snow. She made me promise not to tell anyone. Not even you. Gabriel's chest tightened. An observatory. Amelia had hidden more than whispers. What was inside? Eleanor closed her eyes, dredging memory. It was cold, machines under the floor humming. Screens lit up when she touched the console, glass cases, jars with things in them. She told me not to touch. She was scared. A hidden lab, Amelia's real work. Do you remember how to get there? Not all of it, Eleanor admitted. But the road twisted forever. The trees looked like claws in the snow. If I saw it again, I'd know. Shadow pressed his head into her hand, as if urging her onward. Gabriel exhaled slowly. If she took you there, then she left something for you. Answers. Maybe a way to stop them. Elena's voice shook. But if I remember, maybe they do too. What if they're already there? Then we get there first, Gabriel said firmly. Silence filled the car, broken only by wipers sweeping rain. Elena curled into shadow, whispering into his fur. I promised her I'd protect it. I'll help you find it. Gabriel's chest ached with pride and sorrow. She was 12, but Amelia had given her a soldier's burden. He glanced at her reflection. Small, fragile, yet carrying fire in her eyes. Then that's where we go, he said. Outside, the city lights faded. The mountains loomed, veiled in mist. The road twisted upward into darkness, leading toward a place Amelia had left not for herself, but for her daughter to find when the world was burning. Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching, eyes locked on the night ahead, and in the rear view, Gabriel saw Elena's face. Pale, streaked with grief, but steady now. Focused. The observatory wasn't just a memory. It was their next step. The road climbed higher into the mountains, winding like a dark ribbon through pines heavy with snow. The world beyond the windshield blurred into white silence. Gabriel's hands gripped the wheel, every turn pulling them deeper into Amelia's secrecy. In the back seat, Elena pressed her forehead to the glass, breath fogging it. She wasn't seeing the snow. She was chasing fragments of memory. It looks the same, she whispered. The trees, the way the road twists. I think we're close. Shadow shifted beside her, pressing close, his amber eyes cutting from her face to the window, as if confirming her instinct. The sedan began to slide on the icy incline. Gabriel swore under his breath. Minutes later, he pulled into a turnout. The road swallowed under drifts of white. The silence that followed was absolute. "We walk from here," Gabriel said, pulling gloves tight. "Stay close to me, closer to him." The cold bit hard as they stepped into the snow. Eleanor stumbled often, her legs sinking deep, but Shadow never left her side. When she fell, he circled, nudging her up, his strength lending her courage. Gabriel watched them, the girl and the dog moving almost as one, their bond forged step by step. Hours stretched until a ridge appeared, jagged rocks jutting skyward like claws. Elena stopped, breathless. "That's it." Mom called it the Hand. Beyond, through swirling snow, the dome loomed, an observatory, half buried in ice, its curved roof sagging under years of storms. Elena's voice trembled with awe. "This is it. Mom's a safe place." Shadow barked once, sharp, certain. Inside, the door groaned open to a corridor of peeling paint and patches of ice. Their flashlights cut through stale air heavy with dust and chemicals. Eleanor hesitated at the threshold. "It feels like she's still here." Shadow pressed against her leg until she stepped forward. The stairs led them into a wide chamber beneath the dome. Gabriel's beam swept across rows of lab benches buried under dust. Glass vials, microscopes, notebooks scattered like relics of a war fought in silence. And everywhere, Amelia's handwriting covered scraps of paper. Bold, urgent, impossible to ignore. Elena's throat caught. She reached for a yellowed note. "Adaptive sequence must be destroyed before Aegis replicates." Gabriel found scorch marks along one wall, a half-burned notebook crumbling in his hands. Fragments remained. Pathogen binds to neurological receptors, rewriting. He closed it sharply. She tried to destroy it. Shadow growled from the corner. Gabriel pulled free a metal case, its vials intact, each labeled prototype in Amelia's hand. Eleanor's breath hitched. "She told me never to touch the jars." Now they knew why. Among the scattered notebooks, Gabriel found one marked with a red ribbon. Inside, Amelia's message cut through the years. "Do not trust the agencies. The serpent is inside the garden. Only Eleanor holds the key." The words made his stomach turn. He saw Keen's serpent ring glinting in the rain, betrayal confirmed. Eleanor traced another page with shaking fingers. For Elena, be brave. Tears welled in her eyes. She worked until the end. Shadow pressed his muzzle into her palm, steadying her. At the old console, Gabriel coaxed the machine awake. The screen flickered, code filling the dark. "It will answer you," he said softly. Elena hesitated, then touched the keyboard. The system rippled, responding instantly. Authorization recognized. Neural key accepted. Her name unlocked a folder pulsing faintly. Demonstration. She clicked. The video filled the screen. A sterile white chamber. Men in masks behind glass. A rabbit in a cage. A vial of clear liquid vented into the air. The animal convulsed, collapsed within seconds. Elena gasped, clutching Shadow's fur. The camera shifted. Behind the glass, men watched. One stepped forward. On his hand gleamed a serpent-shaped ring. Gabriel's jaw locked. A voice, cold and precise, narrated, "Phase 1 complete. Pathogen responds within 90 seconds. Ready for field-scale demonstration." The video cut. Elena's voice was a whisper. "They're going to use it. On people." Gabriel urged her on. She opened more files. Diagrams of rewritten genes, charts mapping infection rates. A world map appeared. Entire cities shaded red. At the bottom of the file, Amelia's scrawl glared across the page. "The demonstration will be public." Soon, Elena found the line that froze them both. Demonstration scheduled. 2 weeks. Location undisclosed. Her hands shook. "We don't have time." Gabriel's voice was iron. "If they succeed, it won't be hundreds. It'll be cities." Shadow pressed harder against Elena, anchoring her trembling body. She buried her face in his fur, whispering through tears, "She left this for us." "That means we have to stop them." Gabriel crouched so their eyes met. "Not you alone. Us. Yours, mine, Shadow's. We carry it together." Shadow barked once, sharp and steady. Elena nodded. Her tears no longer just grief, but resolve. Gabriel pulled the USB free, shutting the system down. The lab sank back into shadow. Amelia's ghost lingering in every scribbled warning and vial on the shelves. He looked at Elena, so small, clutching the shepherd who never left her side, and felt the weight of Amelia's trust. "We don't have time to be afraid anymore," he said. Elena whispered into Shadow's ear, her voice trembling but sure. "Then we'll be brave." The vow settled heavy in the silence, deeper than the snow piling above. The war had found them in the mountains, and now, at last, they knew the shape of the enemy's weapon. Snow thickened by nightfall, falling in heavy sheets that smothered the mountain into silence. The abandoned observatory sagged under its weight, half erased by the storm. Gabriel sat at the stairwell with his pistol across his lap, Shadow dozing by the door, ears twitching even in sleep. Eleanor huddled beside the workbench, scribbling in one of her mother's scorched journals, trying to anchor herself in the ghost of Amelia's words. The attack came like lightning. A metallic thud. Then the side door burst open. Dark figures stormed in, shadows uncoiling from the storm. "Elena!" Gabriel roared, snapping to his feet. 2 men were on her instantly, one clamping a hand over her mouth, the other yanking her arms back. She screamed against the gag. Shadow erupted forward, a snarl tearing the air as his jaws clamped on an arm, dragging one man down. But the second shoved Elena through the door before Gabriel could fire. More operatives surged in, bursts of gunfire forcing him to cover. Her muffled cry echoed once, then the storm swallowed it. When silence returned, the room was littered with blood and bodies, but Elena was gone. Shadow stood at the door, trembling, his muzzle red, his eyes burning with fury. He pressed his nose to the snow, circling tight. Gabriel grabbed his collar, voice ragged. "Find her, boy. Don't lose her." Shadow barked once, sharp and certain, then lunged into the blizzard. Gabriel followed. The night became a blur of white and breath. Wind tore at his face, snow clawed at his legs, but Shadow moved like a blade, his body driving forward with relentless instinct. Every few strides he barked, a signal across the storm, as if to keep Eleanor tethered to them. Gabriel stumbled after him, chest burning. He could still hear her cry, Small, terrified, stolen. Shadow veered left, plunging through a cut in the trees. Then Gabriel saw it. A faint yellow glow between trunks. A cabin, half buried in snow, smoke trailing weakly from its chimney. Shadow's bark cracked the night as he lunged faster. Gabriel pressed to a tree, raising his pistol. Through a frost-caked window he saw her, tied to a chair, head jerking up as though she'd heard him. Eleanor, rage, steadied his hands. He leaned low to the dog. On me. Shadow crouched, muscles taut, waiting for the signal. Gabriel kicked the door. It splintered inward. Shadow exploded through the window, glass shattering as he slammed the first man to the ground. Gabriel's pistol barked, dropping the second. "Eleanor!" Her gagged scream cut through the chaos. Gabriel tore the ropes free, and she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "I knew you'd come." But even as he whispered, "You're safe," he knew it wasn't true. This was only the beginning. Earlier, inside the cabin, Eleanor had already faced her trial. The man with the serpent ring leaned into the lamplight, his voice soft, almost kind. "You know what your mother left. Tell me the code." Her lips trembled. "I don't know." He smiled faintly, circling her like a vulture. Amelia thought she could hide the key in her daughter. But you are not her. You have only fear. He pressed a knife against her shoulder, close enough to sting. "Tell me, and it ends quickly." Terror knifed through her chest, but so did memory. Courage is remembering who you are. Her whisper cracked, but held. "I'm my mother's daughter." The man's smile faltered. He slammed the knife into the chair's arm, wood splintering. "Defiance will not keep you alive. When we demonstrate the weapon, millions die, and it will be on you." Tears blurred her vision, guilt clawing, but she forced the words past her lips, louder this time. "I remember who I am, and I won't help you." For the first time, his mask cracked. Rage twisted his face. He shoved her head back and stormed out, barking orders to his men. Bound, shaking, she whispered her mantra into the storm-creaking silence. "Courage is remembering who you are. Courage is remembering." She would not break. And she knew Shadow was already running. Now he was here. Shadow crashed through the window, a storm of glass and snow. His jaws locked on the serpent ring man's shoulder, dragging him screaming to the ground. Blood sprayed as Gabriel finished the last operative with cold precision. The enforcer writhed under Shadow, his knife skittering away. Gabriel leveled his pistol. "Call them off." The man spat blood, sneering through pain. "You think this ends with me?" Shadow's teeth sank deeper. The scream tore the air. Gabriel didn't fire. He didn't need to. The shepherd had already chosen the verdict. "Elena!" Gabriel barked. She stumbled free of the ropes and collapsed into his arms. "You came," she sobbed. "I told you I would." But it wasn't Gabriel she clung to next. The moment Shadow returned to her, she dropped to her knees, throwing her arms around his neck. Her sobs shook her small body as she buried her face in his blood-dusted coat. Shadow pressed against her, silent, his breath warm against her cheek, absorbing everything she couldn't hold alone. Gabriel crouched beside them, his chest tight. "You were brave, Elena. Braver than men twice your age. You held on, and we found you." She shook her head. "I wasn't brave. I was so scared." "That's courage," Gabriel said softly. "Being scared, but not giving in. You remembered who you are." Her sobs quieted, though her hands never left Shadow's fur. The shepherd curved protectively around her, his heartbeat steady against hers, his body swearing what his voice could not. "I'll never let them take you again." Outside, the storm raged on. But inside that shattered cabin, in the circle of dog and child, there was warmth enough to stand against the cold. Gabriel holstered his weapon. "We're going home." Eleanor lifted her tear-streaked face from Shadow's neck and nodded. And the shepherd, silent as ever, pressed closer. The mountains bled into the valley, their peaks lost in storm clouds. From a snowy ridge, Gabriel lay prone, binoculars pressed to his eyes. Below, a steel fortress rose from the clearing, crowned with satellite dishes and towers. Floodlights swept fences wrapped in barbed wire, trucks grinding in and out over ice. He adjusted the lens, catching the loading bay. Crates marked with a silver serpent coiled around a sword, the mark of Aegis, disappeared into the belly of the building. Beside him, Shadow crouched low, silent but tense, ears forward. Elena knelt close, her breath fogging the air. "This is it, isn't it?" Gabriel lowered the binoculars. His jaw tightened. "Yes, this is where they'll release the pathogen." Her throat closed. "And if they do?" He didn't soften the truth. "Cities burn without fire. No one survives long enough to bury the dead." Eleanor clutched Shadow's fur. The shepherd pressed against her, steadying her with warmth. Gabriel spread a map across the snow. Perimeters double-fenced, cameras every corner, patrols every 15 minutes. But the North Drainage Canal, narrow, but one man and a dog could squeeze through. Eleanor's brow furrowed. "And me?" "You stay behind me," Gabriel said firmly. "No arguments." She opened her mouth, but Shadow nudged her knee, as if reminding her that survival meant trust. She bit back her protest, nodding. Movement below caught Gabriel's eye. A convoy of SUVs. A tall man stepped out, silver serpent ring glinting in the floodlights. Elena's stomach knotted. "The man from the cabin." Gabriel's voice was steel. "He's here, which means the demonstration is close." He folded the map, his eyes cold. "We go in tonight." The storm whipped around them, biting into their skin. Elena's hands trembled, but when she looked down, Shadow's gaze met hers. Steady, unflinching. She took a breath. "Okay." Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder. "If we're separated, if I fall, you keep going. Shadow will stay with you. Don't stop until the weapon is erased. Promise me." Her throat tightened. "I promise." Shadow thumped his tail once in the snow, sealing the vow. Gabriel rose, a dark silhouette against the storm. Then it settled. Midnight. The first explosion tore the night apart. Fire climbed into the sky, steel shrieking as sirens wailed. Floodlights died, plunging the valley into chaos. "Move!" Gabriel barked, pressing against a concrete wall, pistol drawn. Shadow bolted forward, launching at two guards rounding the corner. His jaws locked on the first man's wrist, dragging him down. Gabriel dropped the second with 2 shots, then kicked the rifle away. "Elena, now." She darted past, clutching her backpack. The USB inside felt like it burned against her chest. Sirens and shouting filled the air, but her focus stayed on the hall ahead. "Control room! Straight ahead!" Gabriel shouted. The ground shook with another blast, dust raining from the ceiling. Shadow snarled as another guard appeared. He hit him like a bullet, Gabriel covering with precise fire. Together, they pushed Elena through the restricted access door. The control room glowed sterile white. Monitors displayed maps, streams of data, a digital countdown. At the center, a console pulsed like it was waiting. Elena froze. This was it. The reason her mother had died. The reason men had chased her through fire and snow. Her hands trembled as she pulled the USB free. Outside, boots thundered closer. Gabriel's voice roared, "Do it now!" She shoved it into the port. The system lit, a synthetic voice calm against chaos. Neural key required. Confirm identity. Elena's voice shook. Elena Cross. The system scanned her eyes, her fingerprints. Then the code rippled, peeling back. Files opened, diagrams, shipment routes, and a timer. Demonstration sequence. Initiated. 00:57:22. Her breath caught. They've already started it. Her fingers flew across the keys, guided by instinct and memory. Come on, Mom. Show me what to do. The door burst open. A guard raised his rifle. Shadow slammed him aside, teeth tearing into his arm. Gabriel's pistol barked, finishing the fight. Elena, status? He demanded. They've already started the release, she cried. Less than an hour. Gabriel's gut clenched. Then stop it, whatever it takes. Shadow circled her, blood on his muzzle, panting but unyielding. His nose brushed her leg, grounding her. She whispered to him, steadying herself too. We can do this, boy. The console pulsed. Override possible. Confirm passphrase. Her mind went blank, until a whisper in memory. Her mother's voice. The garden hides the serpent. Her eyes widened. She typed it. Pause. Then, override accepted. Relief surged, but the screen wasn't done. Erase all prototypes. When? The walls shook with fire. Heat poured through the door. Gabriel shouted, Elena! She slammed the key. Why? Files collapsed. Red zones vanished from the map. The countdown froze, then dissolved into nothing. It's gone, she gasped, tears spilling. Mom! It's gone! Gabriel dropped another guard at the threshold, chest heaving. He turned, pride and urgency burning in his eyes. Then we finish this. The serpent-ringed man stepped through the haze, his coat torn, one arm bloody from Shadow's bite, but his eyes burned with fury. In his hand gleamed a pistol. You think you've won? His voice cut through the alarms. You've only delayed what cannot be stopped. Gabriel fired first, clipping his shoulder. The man staggered, but leveled his pistol again. Not at Gabriel, but at Elena. Time frozen. The muzzle flared, and Shadow moved. The shepherd launched with a snarl that split the air. The bullet struck him mid-leap, driving through his flank, but his momentum carried him into the man's chest. The pistol skittered across the floor. Both crashed hard, Shadow's teeth sinking deep, his growl shaking the room. Gabriel's shot rang out clean. The man jerked, eyes wide, then crumpled. The serpent ring gleamed once in the red strobe, before going still. Gabriel turned, and saw Shadow stumble, blood pooling fast. Elena! He roared. She dropped to her knees, her scream tearing free. No! Shadow! Her arms wrapped around him, sobbing. His breath came in ragged bursts, his eyes finding hers, steady even now. She whispered through tears, You saved me. You always save me. Shadow licked her cheek, slow and deliberate. His tail thumped once against the floor. Gabriel pressed against the wound, desperate. Stay with us, boy. Stay with us. His voice broke in a way Elena had never heard. The building groaned, fire licking the walls. But Elena heard only the slowing rhythm of Shadow's breath. She clung to him, whispering, Don't leave me. Please. His amber eyes closed briefly, then opened again, fixing on her one last time. His body sagged against her arms. Gabriel's throat tightened. He pulled Elena close, his arm around both child and dog. We'll get him out, he swore, even as alarms shrieked and fire roared. He's not done yet. He forced her up, her arms still gripping Shadow. Then Gabriel bent, lifting the shepherd into his own. Shadow's blood soaked his coat, but he carried him without hesitation. You carried us this far, he whispered. I'll carry you now. They staggered into the night as the compound collapsed behind them, fire clawing at the sky. The snow swallowed smoke and flame. the storm carrying away the screams of Aegis's end. Gabriel laid Shadow gently in the snow. Elena collapsed beside him, burying her face in his fur, her sobs raw. The pathogen was gone. The serpent was dead. The world had been saved. But Elena heard only the slowing breath of the dog, who had given everything. She pressed her cheek against him, whispering through tears the words her mother had left her. Courage is remembering who you are. Shadow had remembered, and in doing so, he had saved her life. The storm had passed by dawn. Snow lay heavy across the valley, softening even the jagged ruins of the Aegis compound. Smoke drifted upward in pale tendrils, carrying the scent of ash and twisted steel into a sky washed faint with morning light. In a borrowed mountain cabin, Shadow lay on a thick blanket spread across the wooden floor. Bandages wrapped his side where the bullet had torn through muscle. His fur was dark with dried blood, his chest rising shallowly, breath rattling with every exhale. Elena sat cross-legged beside him, her small hands pressed into his coat as if touch alone could tether him to life. Her cheeks were raw from crying, her eyes swollen, but she hadn't moved since Gabriel laid the shepherd down hours before. "Please stay," she whispered, her cheek resting against his ribs. She listened for the faint thud of his heart. Too slow, too fragile, but still there. Still life. Gabriel sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, exhaustion carved into his face. He had cleaned and stitched Shadow's wound with battlefield precision, though he knew the odds. He'd seen men live from wounds like this. He'd seen many more slip away. But watching Elena, he knew Shadow could not be allowed to fall. Not now. When the girl turned to him, her eyes shimmered with dread. "He's getting colder." Gabriel rose, draping another blanket across the shepherd's body, tucking it gently around him. He crouched beside her. His voice was steady, the voice of a soldier, calming frightened recruits. "He's still fighting. That's what matters." Elena shook her head fiercely. "He gave everything. He can't leave me, Gabriel. He just can't." At the sound of her voice, Shadow stirred faintly, one paw twitching against the floor. Elena gasped and caught it in both hands. "See? He hears me. He knows I'm here." Gabriel placed a hand on her shoulder. "He knows, and he's holding on for you. That's the kind of dog he is, loyal to the very end." She bent low, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You saved me when nobody else could. You took the bullet meant for me. If you leave now, it should have been me, not you." Shadow exhaled, a long, rattling breath, his amber eyes cracking open. Dim, hazy, but still burning with that familiar light. Elena sobbed with relief. "There you are. Don't you dare stop looking at me." Gabriel pressed a hand to Shadow's neck, feeling the faint pulse. "He's not done yet, Elena, but you have to be strong for him now." She whispered, broken but resolute. "I'm not strong without him." "You don't have to be without him," Gabriel murmured. "Just be with him." Sometimes that's enough. The cabin fell into silence, broken only by Shadow's labored breathing and the low crackle of the fire. Elena never let go of his paw. She leaned against him, whispering stories of her mother, bedtime tales, the sound of Amelia's laugh, anything to keep the shepherd's heartbeat tied to hers. Gabriel listened in quiet sorrow, the bond between girl and dog holding firm even as death pressed at the edges. Hours bled away. The snow shifted outside, dusk lowering its grey curtain. Then, faint but real, Shadow's breathing steadied. His tail tapped once against the floor. Eleanor gasped, her face lighting through tears. "Did you see? He's still here." Gabriel's lips lifted into the faintest, weary smile. "So are we." In the days that followed, the story broke across the world. First whispered through intelligence channels, then flashing across every television, every newspaper, every glowing screen. Dr. Amelia Cross, the anchor intoned, a brilliant scientist who uncovered a bioweapon program inside the covert organization Aegis. Silenced before she could reveal it, she entrusted the truth to her daughter, 12-year-old Eleanor Cross. With the help of federal detective Gabriel Ward and his canine partner Shadow, they destroyed the prototypes and stopped the weapon before its release. Images rolled, satellite photos of the burning compound, convoys winding through snow-choked passes, officials standing grim at podiums. Words like heroism, sacrifice, loyalty rippled across the nation. In the cabin, Gabriel sat before the flickering television, the glow painting his worn features. Elena sat beside Shadow, the shepherd's head in her lap, her fingers combing gently through his fur. His breaths were shallow, his body weak, but his eyes opened at her touch, anchoring her with quiet devotion. "They're talking about Mom," Elena whispered. Gabriel nodded. On screen, Amelia's photograph appeared. Hair tied back, lab coat crisp, eyes alive with thought. Below, scientist, mother, hero. Elena's throat tightened. She's everywhere now. Everyone knows. Gabriel rested a hand on her shoulder. That's what she wanted. For the truth to live. For the world to see. Tears welled again, but she blinked them back. Stroking Shadow's fur, she whispered, "I just wish she could see me. That I didn't let her down." "You didn't," Gabriel said gently. "She trusted you with everything. Not me, not anyone else. You carried it. You're the reason we're here." On screen, an official declared, "Aegis has been dismantled. Its leaders were arrested. Its networks severed. But this victory belongs to a family, to a child's courage, a brother's determination, and the loyalty of a dog who stood where no one else could." Eleanor pressed her face into Shadow's neck. "They're saying his name," she whispered. "Shadow." The shepherd stirred faintly, his tail tapping against the floor. Gabriel's lips curved. He's earned it. The broadcast ended with candlelight vigils at Amelia's grave. Strangers left flowers, whispered her name like a prayer. Elena reached for Gabriel's hand, and he took it silently, grounding her. The anchor's final words lingered in the cabin air. Even when shadows close in, light can be carried forward by the smallest hands. Gabriel shut off the set. His gaze drifted to the girl and the dog, the only reasons he was still breathing. His voice was quiet, almost to himself. They know the story now, but only we know what it cost. Eleanor pressed her cheek to Shadow's head. It's okay. They'll remember you too. A week later, beneath a pale winter sun, they climbed the hill to the cemetery. Snow blanketed the rows of stones, muting the world into silence. Elena walked slowly, her mittened hands clenched, Shadow pressing close beside her. His gait was slower now, his body still scarred, but his eyes were bright. Gabriel followed a step behind, carrying no flowers, only the weight of memory. They reached Amelia's grave. The headstone gleamed with her name. White lilies lay upon it, their petals touched with frost, placed by strangers who had come before them. Eleanor stood still, her shoulders rising and falling, as though holding back a tide inside her. Shadow pressed against her leg, steadying her. She knelt, brushing snow from the stone. Her whisper broke into the still air. "Hi, Mom." Her voice trembled as she pressed her forehead to the cold granite. "I came back, like I promised. We did it. The weapon's gone. Aegis is gone. You can rest now." She drew a breath, her voice softening. "The world is safe." Tears slid down her cheeks. Shadow lay beside her, resting his chin across her lap, anchoring her to the earth. Gabriel stood a few steps back, silent. This moment was not his. It belonged to the girl and her mother, bound by promises and sacrifice. At last, Elena leaned back, wiping her cheeks. She looked at Gabriel, her voice small but steady. "I thought I'd feel empty, like I lost everything, but I don't, because Shadow's still here. And you are too." Gabriel nodded, his eyes heavy but kind. "Your mother would be proud, Eleanor. Not because of what we stopped, but because of who you are. You remembered." Elena pressed her hand to her chest, whispering the words that had carried her through every storm. "Courage is remembering who you are." She looked down at Shadow, who gazed up at her with unwavering amber eyes. Her lips curved into a faint, tear-bright smile. "And I know who I am now," she whispered. She touched the stone once more. "I'm your daughter, Mom, and I'm his girl." Snow fell softly around them, blanketing the world in silence. And beneath the pale winter sun, a child, her uncle, and a shepherd stood together. Not as survivors of the past, but as keepers of a legacy that would never be forgotten. Shadow's tail thumped weakly against the snow, as if in agreement. Elena bent low, pressing her lips to the shepherd's scarred head, then turned back to the grave. Her voice was firmer now, carrying not just grief, but resolve. "We'll carry your light. We'll keep going. Me and Gabriel. And him. Always." The silence that followed was not heavy this time. It was tender, filled with the presence of everything Amelia had left behind. Her courage, her love, her sacrifice, alive in the girl, the brother, and the shepherd who stood at her grave. Gabriel stepped closer then, resting a hand on Elena's shoulder. "It's time to go." Elena nodded, rising slowly, her hand never leaving Shadow's head. Together, they turned back toward the path, leaving behind only their footprints pressed into the snow. 3 trails leading away from a stone that held not just an ending, but a beginning. As they descended the hill, the sun broke faintly through the clouds, casting long golden rays across the white earth. Shadow lifted his head toward it, ears pricking, eyes catching the light. And Elena, holding his paw as if it were the most natural thing in the world, whispered one last time into the wind, words meant only for her mother, but carried far beyond. "We did it, Mom. The world is safe." The snow carried the words away, soft and endless. And the story of love, of loyalty, of sacrifice, closed not with grief, but with hope. When you look back on stories like this, it's hard not to feel a quiet kind of awe for what dogs give us. A German shepherd doesn't weigh the cost, doesn't hesitate, doesn't ask for anything in return. They just stay. Their loyalty reminds us that love isn't always loud or complicated. Sometimes it's simply being there when it matters most. I think that's why so many of us hold these animals so close to our hearts. They don't just protect us, they heal something inside us. The lonely places, the tired places, with their steady eyes and quiet presence. If you'd ever like to explore ways to deepen that bond with your own dog, there are some wonderful resources out there that feel more like a friend sharing wisdom than a manual. One I've found meaningful is here, Link. No pressure, just something you might enjoy if it speaks to you. Take it as a gentle suggestion from someone who understands how much these animals mean. Because in the end, it isn't just about training or care, it's about honoring the loyalty they've already given us.